Lu Yu suddenly regains consciousness, and from his expression we can tell he has been reborn. While pondering how he ended up in this situation, a lady suddenly steps into the room. The girl happens to be his personal maid and the future sword maiden. She is immediately shocked to see her master awake, and it turns out she too has been sent back to the past. From her reaction, our protagonist instantly confirms his suspicion. Without hesitation, Lu Yu takes off his boots and orders her to wash his feet. Knowing her current position, she is forced to obey him. Seeing the displeased look on her face, our protagonist no longer bothers hiding the fact that they both regressed. This leaves her completely stunned because Lu Yu remembers everything she did to him in the previous timeline. However, instead of making her suffer immediately, our protagonist decides to let her go and sever all ties with her. Of course, this is his own form of revenge. In his previous life, Lu Yu sacrificed everything to help these women, only for them to betray him in the end. Now, he plans to grow stronger on his own while watching them slowly fall apart without him. To understand how it all began, we shift to the very day everything happened. Lu Yu is known as the 9 Lives Venerable, and today is the day he is supposed to face the Great Tribulation. Right on cue, our protagonist appears alongside the other heavenly powerhouses, all of whom are venerables. Of course, some of the warriors dislike him, especially since he is surrounded by 8 empresses. However, one of the men immediately silences the others. Because under the heavens, Lu Yu is the only person worthy of being called invincible. And today is a once-in-a-lifetime event for him, as this is the day he ascends beyond the venerable realm. Of course, Lu Yu is more than ready to face the Great Tribulation head-on. Right on cue, the ancient celestial appears. This being happens to be the strongest rank 1 Great Tribulation ever recorded. Nonetheless, our protagonist boldly challenges the ancient celestial, and just like that, the battle begins. From the sidelines, the 8 empresses watch with dark expressions, knowing it is finally time to execute the plan they have waited so long for. As if on cue, the ancient celestial uses a forbidden time technique and summons 8 clones. This is because he plans to travel through time and kill our protagonist across different timelines. Seeing this, Lu Yu remains confident. He declares that no matter the era or timeline, he will always remain the strongest. Unfortunately, reality proves otherwise. Almost instantly, our protagonist begins to feel that something is wrong. It turns out he has been poisoned by a Tao-devouring goo, and the people responsible are none other than the 8 empresses themselves. Seeing this, the ancient celestial sighs in pity, noting that the women Lu Yu considered family have betrayed him. Hearing this, the women scoff coldly. They claim that Lu Yu's so-called righteous intentions were nothing more than lust and possessiveness. To them, killing the demon who oppressed them was only natural. Hearing their accusations, Lu Yu's anger reaches its peak. These witches dare blame him for their misfortune, yet every single one of them forgets that without him, none of them would have ever reached their current positions. But in that instant, the ancient celestial strikes him while he is distracted. Everyone is shocked by the sudden outcome, while the empresses can barely contain their joy. Realizing he is about to die, Lu Yu decides to detonate himself. He plans to drag everyone down with him. Seeing this, the ancient celestial feels dissatisfied with their battle. Because of that, he uses the time travel technique once more. But this time, he sends both Lu Yu and the 8 empresses 50 years into the past. The ancient celestial truly knows how to cook, and just like that, our protagonist and all 8 empresses are sent back in time. Back in the present, after informing Chu Ling of everything, our protagonist takes out a token. It turns out to be a contract agreement. Now that it has burned away, it means the girl is finally free. Without hesitation, Lu Yu immediately tells her to get out of his villa. Trying to provoke him, Chu Ling asks why he tried to kill himself in their previous life. To this, our protagonist coldly replies that it is none of her business before warning her to get lost. Seeing this, she leaves while noting that Lu Yu will definitely die a terrible death in this life. In her mind, she believes she will be perfectly fine without him since she possesses the innate sword body. For now, she decides it is finally time to return home and reunite with her parents and brother. Watching her leave, our protagonist merely smirks. The foolish woman has no idea what awaits her the moment she returns home. Lu Yu silently thinks to himself that Chu Ling will soon learn who the true demons really are. In this life, he promises himself that he will never pity any of them again. Just as he is about to open the door, it is suddenly blasted apart. Of course, the woman responsible is none other than Yue Hongling. The moment she locks eyes with our protagonist, she becomes furious and immediately attacks him. However, Lu Yu easily stops her before grabbing her by the neck and asking if she truly dares to attack him. Realizing brute force will not work, Yue Hongling immediately switches tactics and attempts to play the victim. In response, Lu Yu calmly points out that she just destroyed his door. If she does not fix it, he swears to kill her. Hearing this, she becomes even more furious, shouting that if it were not for Lu Yu, she would have ended up with Feng Wuxi. Our protagonist calls Hongling a fool, pointing out that they have all regressed. Instead of looking for him, she should be searching for Feng Wuxi. After feeling the overwhelming pressure from Lu Yu, Hongling finally decides to repair the door, knowing that at her current level, she is no match for him. With that, Lu Yu tosses her outside like trash. He warns her that if the door is not fixed before he returns, she is dead. The foolish woman still has the nerve to question the way he is treating her, considering their relationship in their previous life. In response, Lu Yu coldly reminds her that the past is the past, and in this life he owes none of them anything. Later, our protagonist arrives at a quiet courtyard. He has come to see his master, Bai Qiulan. After respectfully greeting her, she notices that Lu Yu now possesses only one life and immediately asks what happened to the remaining 8. Since he cannot exactly explain that he lost them while fighting the ancient celestial, he simply says that he merged them into one because of his cultivation path. Surprisingly, Lu Yu's master is actually one of the 8 empresses who betrayed him. Apparently, in their previous life, Bai Qiulan suffered from a terrifying condition, and Lu Yu was the one who helped her survive it. But this time, she insists that she no longer needs his help because he already taught her how to suppress the condition in their previous life. Hearing this, our protagonist simply nods while silently thinking to himself that if he had not transferred her chaos yin poison into his own body, she would never have become the Taiyun Empress. Regardless, Lu Yu decides that in this life, he will focus only on himself. And once again, we learn something shocking. Our protagonist entered this world with a system. The system presents him with 3 options. Lu Yu is surprised that the system no longer requires energy to function. Apparently, it has already merged with the heavenly Tao itself. Although the system encourages him, Lu Yu still feels irritated because it indirectly keeps calling him weak. Nonetheless, our protagonist immediately begins full-scale cultivation with the system's assistance. Meanwhile, we shift over to the Chu mansion, where Chu Ling finally arrives home. She is exhausted, yet relieved to finally reunite with her family. Right on cue, one of the guards expresses shock upon seeing the young miss return. Yet strangely enough, he calls her a beggar and claims this is the Chu family estate, ordering her to leave immediately. Seeing this, Chu Ling properly introduces herself. But instead of calming down, the guard becomes even angrier and draws his sword, accusing her of impersonating the young miss. Confused, Chu Ling asks if Chu Si truly does not remember his big sister, especially after how kindly she treated him when he was younger. Even so, Chu Si continues trying to drive her away. However, deep down, he wonders how his young miss could be foolish enough to return home. In reality, he is only pretending not to recognize her in order to help her escape. Unfortunately, Chu Ling's persistence alerts the other guards, who quickly inform the mansion that she has returned. Seeing this, her father, Chu Zhongtian, and her adoptive mother, Zheng Shuiyu, immediately rush outside to welcome her. Chu Ling runs straight into her father's arms. Meanwhile, Zheng Shuiyu tearfully asks where she has been all this time, explaining that they were worried sick about her. Chu Ling apologizes and explains that she was kidnapped and taken to the Great Tao sect. She promises never to run away again. Hearing this, her brother, Chu Shufei, immediately bursts into tears and thanks the heavens, saying that now he will no longer be used as the family scapegoat. Meanwhile, our protagonist continues cultivating. He explains the cultivation realms of this world, starting from the postnatal realm all the way up to the Tao integration realm. In his previous life, he advanced from the 5th layer of Qi refining to the 9th layer in only 15 days. But suddenly, he coughs up blood and realizes something is terribly wrong. Looking at the system, he discovers that he somehow regressed with all the poisons, the empresses implanted into his body. It is clear that the women never wanted him to succeed in this life. Unfortunately for them, our protagonist possesses an overpowered system. The moment he asks how to remove the first poison, the system informs him that he must first break through into the original core realm, the stage directly after Qi refining. Thankfully, Lu Yu immediately remembers a special treasure capable of helping him achieve this breakthrough. In his previous life, he gave the perfect refining origin pill to Hongling, but this time, it belongs entirely to him. While thinking about her, our protagonist is suddenly interrupted. It turns out Hongling has just broken through. This is because the sect usually announces disciples' achievements using messenger cranes. Our protagonist expected this much. After all, she is destined to become a future empress. Even with the system's assistance, Lu Yu was only 2 days faster than her. As he heads down the mountain, the system curiously asks what he is planning to do. Without hesitation, Lu Yu replies that he is heading to the tomb of the void refining expert in order to obtain the returning origin pill. In the next chapter, Hongling finally arrives, believing no one will discover the ancient tomb within a month. Inside the tomb lie the most precious treasures of all, fragments of the 9 lives undying heaven scriptures, and of course, the perfect returning to origin pill. At first, she feels confident, noting that in this life she is already 1 step ahead of our protagonist. But in the very next second, she is left completely shocked. Someone has already beaten her to the punch and even mocked her for being slow. Of course, she does not need anyone to tell her who it is. The culprit can only be our protagonist, making her absolutely furious. Unfortunately for her, the moment she tosses the book to the ground, she accidentally triggers a trap formation. Now she is convinced it is nothing less than a greeting gift from our protagonist. Hongling only manages to escape after 3 whole days. And naturally, the very first person she comes to see is our protagonist. She immediately shouts, demanding that he come outside. Instead of responding, our protagonist simply knocks her back with his aura. After sending her flying, he coldly asks whether her parents failed to teach her proper manners if she dares barge into someone's residence without even knocking first. Of course, this only makes Hongling even more furious, so she quickly changes her approach. This time, she politely knocks and asks for permission to enter. However, she is met with a cold rejection from our protagonist. Enraged once more, she begins banging on his door, accusing him of taking her perfect returning to origin pill. Because of this disturbance, our protagonist knocks her back once again. Hongling forces herself to calm down because she knows she cannot defeat him. This time, she asks properly whether he took the perfect returning to origin pill from the ancient tomb. When our protagonist refuses to admit anything, her anger finally reaches its peak, and she decides to fight him to take it back by force. That is when our protagonist's master finally steps in and orders Hongling to calm down. The moment Hongling sees Bai Qiulan, she immediately drops to the ground and complains that our protagonist has been bullying her. Turning toward Lu Yu, Bai Qiulan asks whether he really hit his junior sister. Our protagonist coldly replies that she barged into his room without knocking, and asks whether she has no manners at all. Still, his master points out that Hongling is his junior sister regardless, and she wonders why they were fighting in the first place. Hongling quickly accuses our protagonist of taking her perfect returning to origin pill, insisting she merely came to make a trade in order to get it back. Because of this, Bai Qiulan notes that our protagonist's attitude isn't bad, meaning he likely has no need for the pill. Naturally, she suggests that he hand it over to his junior sister and even offers compensation in return. Originally, that should have been the case, but after being poisoned before, our protagonist now truly needs the pill himself. Of course, Hongling immediately accuses him of spouting nonsense. Apparently, the reason she needs the pill so badly is because, without it, she will not be able to condense a saint core within her realm. Because of this, our protagonist suddenly decides to hand over the pill. Seeing this, his master feels relieved, glad that our protagonist is finally being reasonable. But in the very next second, our protagonist simply takes out the pill only to swallow it right in front of them. His master is left stunned as he openly disobeys her, while Hongling becomes absolutely furious. In the end, she storms away, declaring that she will still condense a saint core and use it to humiliate our protagonist in the future. Bai Qiulan can only sigh helplessly. Even if our protagonist is angry, she still feels he should not treat them this way. Meanwhile, back at the Chu family mansion, Chu Ling is busy being spoiled by her parents. Because of this, she happily thanks her mother and swears that she will never leave them again. Her words leave her adoptive mother slightly emotional, causing her to ask whether she is better than her biological mother. Chu Ling happily confirms it, noting that her real parents abandoned her, so the difference between them is obvious. With that, her adoptive mother decides to leave and tells her to get some rest. However, the moment she turns around, her expression instantly changes as she secretly thinks to herself that the Chu family has finally been saved. As if on cue, Chu Ling suddenly begins feeling sleepy. When she asks her adoptive mother about it, the woman simply turns back and calmly tells her to stop worrying and just take a nap. Even so, Chu Ling can clearly sense that something is wrong. To investigate, she uses an advanced technique and circulates her aura throughout her body. To her absolute shock, she discovers that she has been poisoned. This immediately makes her suspect that the food her mother gave her earlier was intentionally poisoned, though she refuses to believe it at first. Suddenly, she hears knocking at the door. Acting quickly, she pretends to be asleep. Moments later, her mother enters alongside the rest of the family and casually explains that she fed Chu Ling a sleeping poison. Hearing this, Chu Ling's brother compliments their mother, saying that experience truly comes with age. Chu Ling silently listens as they discuss plans to take her to the old ancestor. Although the situation looks terrible for her, it is still strangely satisfying to watch. The next chapter begins with the Chu family taking Chu Ling to meet the old ancestor. On the way, a guard reports to Chu Shengtian about his success in handling someone. Unfortunately, that person happens to be the poor Chu Si, who gets himself killed because he tried to help Chu Ling, almost ruining Chu Zhongtian's plans. Turning to his son, Chu Zhongtian points out that he is no longer going to be used as the sword sacrifice, meaning he no longer has any excuse to waste his life away. The boy agrees that his father is correct and promises that this time he will behave and focus on his cultivation. Of course, Chu Ling happens to be conscious and is piecing everything together. She now realizes that the only reason they raised her was for this very purpose. However, Chu Zhongtian's advice does not last long as his son suddenly becomes lustful and suggests having fun with Chu Ling first. His father immediately grabs him by the ear, pointing out that even though Chu Ling does not share the same blood, she is still considered his sister. However, her supposed brother's response leaves her in tears. Apparently, she is the daughter of two slaves, and they were killed by the Chu family because she possessed an innate sword body. What is even worse is that her so-called adoptive mother suggests that her husband should let their son enjoy Chu Ling for half an hour first. Hearing this, Chu Zhongtian reminds everyone that they cannot keep the old ancestor waiting, otherwise they will be the ones to pay the price. It is obvious that Chu Ling is beginning to see that her entire family are complete scum, and she finally realizes why our protagonist never wanted her to return. Back when she was still his maid, our protagonist actually guided her in training, and she would usually ask him when he would let her go see her parents. Lu Yu's response was always the same. He constantly reminded her that those people were not her biological parents, meaning there was no need to be in such a hurry to see them. She would pout angrily, pointing out that even though they were not her biological parents, at least they did not abandon her. Of course, this was usually the part where our protagonist would tell her that she could only leave once she finished her training. Naturally, she tried her best to persuade him because she believed he was simply lying and trying to coax her into staying. Eventually, she returned, only to discover that she was too late and the Chu family had already been destroyed. Of course, she blamed our protagonist for this. While thinking about all of this, she finally remembers what her family actually needed her for. On the other side, our protagonist watches everything unfold through the system like pure cinema. When the system wonders if she is still in a coma, our protagonist scoffs. After all, Chu Ling reached the Emperor realm in her previous life, so there is no way simple poison could affect her. He concludes that she is merely lying there, refusing to accept the truth right in front of her. Hearing this, the system asks if our protagonist plans to save her, to which he responds negatively. Although he truly wants her to suffer and experience hell, unfortunately for him, she is fully capable of saving herself. Eventually, they arrive before the old ancestor, and the entire Chu family bows respectfully. The old man, Chu Changsheng, does not respond and instead stares at them with a scrutinizing glare. Seeing that they have brought Chu Ling, he dismisses everyone else but tells Chu Zhongdian and his son to stay behind and witness the ceremony of the demon sword's completion. Inside a blazing inferno, a sword can be seen suspended at the center. The old ancestor can barely contain his joy. His sweat and blood over the past 30 years are finally about to pay off. Seeing this, Chu Shangtian congratulates him in advance, noting that once the demon sword is completely forged, the old man will finally step into the shattering infant realm, the fifth realm after the origin core realm. Nonetheless, the old man begins the ritual. The demon sword within the inferno immediately starts releasing a dangerous aura. Seeing this, the old ancestor declares that it is time for the sacrifice. Chu Zhongtian carries Chu Ling toward the inferno while commenting that raising her all these years for this purpose was truly not a waste, and just like that, she is tossed into the inferno. Instead of feeling pity, Her brother merely thinks it is a shame that he never got the chance to have fun with her. At this point, Chu-Ling decides to stop acting. To everyone's shock, she makes the demon sword answer her call. Well, this is because it is actually the very same sword she wielded in her previous life. Now holding the sword, everyone, especially the old ancestor, is left completely stunned. The old man wonders how such a thing is even possible. However, before he can react further, Chu-Ling charges straight at him with the demon sword. Seeing the incoming attack, the old man immediately responds by materializing his own sword. Unfortunately for him, his opponent is none other than the former empress and the legendary sword maiden herself. Before he can even ask how she is able to wield the demon sword, his head is severed instantly. Now, Chu-Ling turns toward her father and brother. She coldly states that the reason this weapon is called the demon sword is because it exists to kill demons like them. Of course, Chu Xiantian immediately drops to his knees, begging for mercy. In response, Chu-Ling coldly points out that she once considered them family, yet they plotted to kill her. Chu Xiantian hurriedly insists they were simply following orders. Now that she has become powerful, there is no longer any need to sacrifice her anymore. In response, Chu-Ling sends him to join the old ancestor. Turning toward her pig of a brother, the boy instantly begins begging for forgiveness, while desperately apologizing to her. However, Chu-Ling kills him as well, noting that he is worse than a dog. Moments later, her mother is left in disbelief. She wonders aloud why Chu-Ling is coming out alone and asks where the rest of the family is. Chu-Ling remains silent for a moment before calmly asking who she is referring to. When her mother points out that she is talking about her father and brother, Chu-Ling turns around and coldly tells her that she no longer has a family. Before the woman can react, Chu-Ling kills her too, insisting that she accompany them in their next life. However, she does not stop there. Later, our protagonist watches as Chu-Ling single-handedly massacres the entire Chu family. He jokingly comments that the woman is truly ruthless, since she did not spare a single person in the household. Afterward, our protagonist closes the stream. The system wonders why he suddenly stopped watching, but our protagonist does not answer. At that exact moment, the system warns him that someone in the nascent soul realm is likely coming after Chu-Ling. Our protagonist simply replies that she is getting exactly what she deserves. Meanwhile, back at the Chu mansion, Chu-Ling is seen sobbing like a child while repeatedly muttering that she was wrong. At that moment, the nascent soul warrior finally arrives. Master Li Jian does not even spare her a glance. Instead, his eyes remain completely fixed on the demon sword. Seeing Chu-Ling in such misery, the man calmly declares that he will end her suffering by killing her. Yet just before striking, he suddenly pauses and wonders aloud why Chu-Ling is not reacting at all. Even after repeatedly swinging his sword at her, she shows no response whatsoever. This causes him to call her a fool, before finally deciding to kill her and seize the demon sword for himself. But to his utter shock, a single strike from Chu-Ling is enough to completely tear apart his clothes. The man is instantly sent flying as he struggles to comprehend what just happened. Chu-Ling is only at the origin core realm, but her swordsmanship has also become incredibly terrifying. As a result, Li Jian immediately abandons the idea of killing her, because he now desires her body instead. Hearing the man's disgusting intentions, Chu-Ling immediately turns around and flees. Master Li Jian quickly chases after her, insisting that he is a good person while repeatedly telling her to come back to Uncle Li. However, Chu-Ling completely ignores him because all she wants now is to atone for her betrayal. The very next day, Hongling once again comes to disturb our protagonist. Seeing that he refuses to respond, she decides to kick the door open. However, the moment she remembers what happened the last time she tried something like that, she ultimately changes her mind. Still, she continues shouting from outside the room, demanding to know why. Even after using all the treasures and pills from her previous life, she still failed to condense a saint core, and instead only formed a heavenly core. Meanwhile, our protagonist calmly sits inside his room cultivating while Hongling continues nagging nonstop outside. Because of this, the system wonders whether our protagonist can truly endure such annoyance. In response, our protagonist immediately tells the system to shut off his hearing so he can cultivate in peace, adding that in this life no one will stop him from ascending and becoming a saint. Eventually, Bai Chulan arrives and asks why Hongling keeps scolding her senior brother. She also wonders what Hongling's heavenly core has to do with him. Because of this, Hongling explains that in the past our protagonist always provided her with treasures and pills during her breakthroughs. However, despite following those exact same methods in this life, the final result ended up completely different. Hearing this, Bai Chulan immediately calls her foolish. She explains that our protagonist did not simply hand over random treasures and pills. Hongling can hardly believe it when Bai Chulan reveals that every treasure and pill our protagonist once gave her had been personally refined and perfected by him. Bai Chulan further points out that our protagonist went through countless trials and errors just to perfect those pills for her. Not to mention that among the 8 empresses, Hongling was the one he cared for the most. That is why Bai Chulan urges her to stop whatever she is doing and sincerely apologize to our protagonist. However, Hongling refuses. Instead, she becomes furious at the mere suggestion because in her mind, if it were not for our protagonist, she and her supposed lover would never have been separated, which indirectly led to his death. Since she refuses to apologize, Bai Chulan punishes her and orders her to head to the back mountain to reflect on her actions and mistakes. She is only permitted to return once she finally sees things clearly. Meanwhile, at the foot of the mountain, Chu Ling has apparently dragged herself all the way back to the sect. She collapses the moment she reaches the entrance of the sect while calling out our protagonist's name. When a female disciple rushes toward her, she is suddenly stopped. Master Li Jian appears, apologizing as he explains that he has been chasing Chu Ling. He claims he has no intention of offending the sect and simply came to take Chu Ling away. To his shock, however, the female disciple immediately stops him because before collapsing, Chu Ling mentions someone from their sect. With that, she tells her fellow disciple to watch both of them while she confirms Chu Ling's identity with our protagonist. Just like that, she arrives at our protagonist's residence and informs him of the current situation. To her surprise, our protagonist simply tells her that he does not know anyone named Chu Ling. She informs him that if he does not know her, then the sect will not save her. Our protagonist remains firm in his reply, causing the system to question his actions. In response, our protagonist asks if the system has forgotten what she did to him in his previous life. Unfortunately, he notes that the woman would not die so easily. Perhaps our protagonist simply wants them to suffer. Meanwhile, the female disciple returns and tells Master Li Jian that he can take Chu Ling away, causing him to remark that he expected this from such a righteous and prestigious sect. Just as he is about to take her away, his hand suddenly becomes frozen. The person responsible is none other than Bai Chulan. The moment the 2 disciples see her, they immediately greet her respectfully. Bai Chulan tells Li Jian that he cannot take Chu Ling away. This instantly enrages Li Jian because of the sect's actions. The female disciple immediately steps forward, furious at the way Li Jian speaks to their master. As a result, Li Jian prepares to fight her, but in the very next instant, he becomes a frozen sculpture. Bai Chulan coldly orders the disciples to deal with the trash while she takes Chu Ling away for treatment. Later within the sect, Bai Chulan begs someone to help treat Chu Ling. After taking a closer look at her, Bai Chulan's senior sister wonders how Chu Ling could have been so heavily wounded. Bai Chulan also expresses her confusion, wondering what force of will kept her going long enough to drag herself back to the sect. Regardless, Bai Chulan's senior sister reassures her that she can treat Chu Ling, allowing Bai Chulan to breathe a sigh of relief. After the treatment, Chu Ling wakes up while calling for our protagonist. Bai Chulan sees that she is finally awake. However, Chu Ling is more interested in knowing where our protagonist is. Bai Chulan's senior sister becomes interested in their conversation after hearing Chu Ling address Bai Chulan so casually. When Bai Chulan informs Chu Ling that our protagonist is still in seclusion, Chu Ling immediately assumes that our protagonist arranged for Bai Chulan to take care of her. Seeing her eagerness to meet him, Bai Chulan suggests that she rest for a while and wait until he exits seclusion. However, Chu Ling boldly states that she cannot wait because she wants to apologize for misunderstanding him all this time. Meanwhile, Bai Chulan's senior sister listens closely and realizes there must be some shocking gossip involved because Chu Ling just claimed that our protagonist was never trying to possess them. Of course, Bai Chulan immediately realizes what the woman is doing. So, she tells her senior sister to give them a moment alone with Chu Ling. Having been caught, the woman immediately decides to leave and give them space to talk. Once they are alone, Bai Chulan insists that Chu Ling stop addressing her so casually as sister. As expected, Bai Chulan's senior sister never actually leaves. Instead, she secretly overhears their conversation about our protagonist. Her curiosity deepens when Bai Chulan mentions that our protagonist used an unavoidable method to treat the Chaos Yin poison. However, before continuing, Bai Chulan realizes that the woman is still eavesdropping outside. As a result, she seals the entire room with her aura. Only then does the poor woman realize she can no longer hear anything. Frustrated, she starts shouting because she desperately wants to know what kind of earth-shattering gossip her sister is deliberately hiding from her. In the next chapter, our protagonist has just finished his seclusion. During this entire time, Chu Ling has been kneeling in front of his house. The system wonders if he would at least go out to see her. However, our protagonist rejects the idea immediately because he still has not forgotten what she did to him in his previous life. In his mind, women will only slow down his cultivation, meaning he wants nothing to do with them. Unfortunately, Chu Ling does not realize this. She believes that if she continues waiting, the day will eventually come when our protagonist forgives her. Meanwhile, at Chixia Peak, one of the sub-peaks among the 72 sub-peaks of the sect, Hongling is busy practicing her swordsmanship. At the same time, a young man watches her closely from afar. The man happens to be Linghu Wushuang. Before he can think any further, Hongling suddenly tosses her sword in his direction. She immediately demands that the person hiding behind the rock come out. Linghu calmly steps forward and introduces himself as the newly inducted eldest disciple of Chixia Peak. After hearing his name, Hongling immediately remembers him. Apparently, this guy is destined to lose to our protagonist, but he only becomes the holy son of the sect because our protagonist refuses to accept the title. Eventually, he dies during the Dark Turmoil battle. In summary, the guy is nothing short of a hero. After complimenting her skills, Linghu expresses his wish to spar with her. Hongling immediately scoffs and tells him that he cannot beat her. Linghu becomes a little upset by her tone because she is not even older than him. He is just about to suggest that they find out through a duel when Hongling cuts him off mid-sentence. She tells him that if he can defeat our protagonist, then she will definitely spar with him. Naturally, Linghu wonders who this mysterious person is, noting that he has no grievance with him and no reason to fight him. Hearing this, Hongling explains that our protagonist is the reason her master punished her and why she is currently confined to Chixia Peak. Poor guy is about to get used without even realizing it. And just like that, Hongling begins telling him everything that happened, starting from the moment she destroyed our protagonist's door. Half an hour later, the young man predictably becomes furious, asking how our protagonist can still call himself a senior after acting like that. Hongling watches in surprise as Linghu leaves in anger, declaring that he will force our protagonist to admit his wrongs. When Hongling warns him that he cannot beat our protagonist, Linghu refuses to back down. Meanwhile, our protagonist is in the middle of his cultivation when he suddenly hears a knock on the door. The moment he learns that Linghu is outside, he wonders why the young man came looking for him. He recalls that, in the original timeline, they were supposed to meet for the first time during the all-sect disciple competition, where Linghu would take second place. Nonetheless, our protagonist decides to meet him and asks why he came to visit. Linghu is naturally surprised that our protagonist already knows who he is. He cannot help but feel a little proud as our protagonist praises him as a genius and lists several of his achievements. After entering the room, Linghu admits that he did not expect our protagonist to know so much about him. Even so, our protagonist continues complimenting him, even calling him the role model of their sect. Hearing this, Linghu immediately reveals that he came here to challenge him. Of course, our protagonist accepts without hesitation, noting that he was bored anyway. He even decides to guide the little guy a bit. Linghu is completely taken aback when our protagonist effortlessly dodges his very first strike. When our protagonist launches a counterattack, Linghu quickly raises his sword to block. However, our protagonist merely smirks. In the next instant, he suddenly appears behind Linghu. Before the young man can even react, our protagonist kicks him from behind. Afterward, our protagonist casually asks if this concludes their spar. Linghu shakes his head and decides to continue. This time, he uses his peak sword art. Linghu is confident that our protagonist cannot dodge this attack. To his shock, however, our protagonist suddenly appears behind him. The moment Linghu turns around, our protagonist raises his fist and calmly tells him to watch closely. Then he grabs Linghu and throws him away as though he weighs nothing at all. Even so, Linghu quickly regains his footing. Now our protagonist asks whether he still wants to continue. Linghu admits that, in terms of skill, our protagonist is indeed strong, but his own comprehension ability is equally impressive. Naturally, our protagonist asks what he means by that. Linghu then explains that he has already comprehended the second form of the Chixia sword art. Our protagonist watches as the sword aura rushes straight toward him. He admits that Ling Hu truly does possess excellent perception. However, with nothing more than a casual wave of his hand, our protagonist effortlessly shatters the sword aura attack, making it clear that the gap between them is on a completely different level. Despite the shock written all over Ling Hu's face, our protagonist respectfully asks whether the spar is over. Ling Hu can only admit defeat, thinking that in the future our protagonist's accomplishments will make his own achievements seem like a joke. Hearing this, our protagonist assures him not to worry. If anyone asks about this duel, he will simply claim that they fought for 10 rounds and that he only won by luck. At that moment, Ling Hu finally realizes that our protagonist is nowhere near the kind of person Hongling described him to be. As a result, he bids farewell and says he hopes to meet our protagonist again in the future. But at that very moment, Chu Ling suddenly appears after noticing that our protagonist has finally come out. In the next instant, however, our protagonist immediately bolts back inside and shuts the door tightly. Chu Ling drops to her knees and begs, asking why our protagonist would shut the door on her again. Slightly confused by the interaction, Ling Hu wonders if this display means that Chu Ling is actually chasing after our protagonist. Unfortunately for him, he gets completely ignored as though he were nothing but air. The poor guy can only sigh inwardly as he leaves, wondering whether the woman is blind. After all, he does not fall short in the looks department either. Later, he reunites with Hongling, who is busy practicing. Interrupting her training session, Ling Hu tells her that he lost just as she predicted. She immediately reminds him that she already warned him. In response, Ling Hu points out that our protagonist is actually a decent person, completely different from how she described him. Hearing this, Hongling claims that our protagonist must simply treat men differently from the way he treats women. To her surprise, he actually agrees, noting that he even saw a woman kneeling in front of our protagonist's residence while he remained completely indifferent. The moment she hears this, Hongling immediately grows curious and asks for more details. Ling Hu describes Chu Ling as an extremely beautiful woman before suddenly remembering that she called herself Chu Linger. Of course, Hongling never imagined that Chu Ling would actually come back begging, completely unlike herself. Even so, she still refuses to accept the idea of returning to our protagonist. She even convinces herself that she is definitely not jealous of Chu Ling. Watching her fall silent while pacing around deep in thought, Ling Hu no longer needs anyone to tell him that she clearly has some kind of relationship with our protagonist. Remembering the reason he originally came, he suggests that the two of them spar. Hongling becomes confused since their agreement was that she would only spar with him if he managed to defeat our protagonist first. However, she quickly becomes fired up after realizing that he might only be asking because he is interested in her. As a result, she declares that she will not hold back the way our protagonist did. Only then does Ling Hu realize, a little too late, that he has stepped on a landmine. Half an hour later, he is completely battered and miserable. With that, Hongling tells him not to bother disturbing her again in the future. Now the poor guy can only wonder whether cultivators from our protagonist's peak are literal monsters. As for Hongling, she completely forgets about the punishment because she is far more interested in finding out why Chu Ling came back to beg our protagonist. Speaking of Chu Ling, she is still kneeling in front of our protagonist's house. As she kneels there, she repeatedly mutters apologies, admitting that she was wrong. Suddenly, a gust of wind pushes against her. Only then does she realize that our protagonist is nowhere to be found inside the house. Arriving at our protagonist's residence, Hongling is shocked to see that Chu Ling is still kneeling there. Demanding to know why she is doing this, Hongling questions whether she truly plans to keep humiliating herself like this. Chu Ling calmly replies that even if our protagonist is not around, she intends to remain kneeling until he returns. Of course, this overly dramatic behavior immediately makes Hongling furious. She coldly remarks that Chu Ling is a complete disappointment to female cultivators everywhere. However, Chu Ling instantly yanks her hand away and admits that Hongling is right to look down on her. She explains that she was the one who gave our protagonist the heavenly rigidity poison, so this punishment is exactly what she deserves. At that very moment, Bai Qiulan arrives. After overhearing the conversation, she points out that even if Chu Ling truly regrets what she did, those events are already in the past. So there is no need for her to keep torturing herself like this. But Chu Ling immediately shakes her head. She explains that the heavenly rigidity poison is impossible to cleanse completely, meaning there is practically no cure for it. Hearing this, Hongling is instantly shocked. Because if that is true, then it means our protagonist regressed while the poison was still inside his body. When Bai Chulan suddenly wonders aloud whether this has something to do with the perfect returning origin pill, Chuling immediately nods. She strongly believes that our protagonist had no choice but to consume the pill because the poison inside his body naturally suppresses half of his strength. Only now does Hongling finally begin to understand him, and she can only lower her head in apology. As for Bai Chulan, she quietly wonders whether the three of them were the ones who misunderstood our protagonist all along in their previous life. Meanwhile, at the back mountain, our protagonist is busy cultivating. Of course, his system shows him everything happening outside. Even so, our protagonist simply tells the system that he has no interest in dealing with any of them anymore. As he mentioned before, he has already realized that these women will only slow down his cultivation path, so he wants nothing to do with them. Because of this, the system asks how long he plans to continue isolating himself and grinding in cultivation. In response, our protagonist explains that he must reach the 13th layer of the Origin Core realm before the Disciples competition begins. The reason is simple. He wants to qualify for entry into the sect's treasure pavilion. Just like that, 3 months pass in the blink of an eye, and the day of the all-sect disciple competition finally arrives. Our protagonist heads toward the competition grounds while riding his flying sword. Unfortunately for him, he unintentionally runs into the 3 women he has been trying so hard to avoid. Chu Ling is the first to spot him. Excited, she immediately calls out to our protagonist, and just like that, both she and Hongling quickly approach him while apologizing repeatedly. Their actions instantly attract the attention of the surrounding disciples. After all, anyone would be shocked to see 2 stunning beauties chasing after a single man. However, to everyone's complete disbelief, our protagonist coldly tells them to get out of his sight. Now that is something nobody except us expected. Having completely lost face, Hongling becomes furious and storms away immediately. Yet Chu Ling still refuses to leave and continues standing there. Seeing this, the surrounding disciples unanimously conclude that our protagonist is truly a legend, the absolute goat among men. Eventually, everyone is gathered at the competition venue. The vice sect master steps forward to address the disciples. Naturally, the speech completely bores our protagonist. Lu Yu notes that even in this life, the vice sect master's speech is just as long and tedious as it was in his previous life. Regardless, the vice sect master eventually explains that the competition will use a single elimination format and insists that every disciple should give it their all, and just like that, the 90th sect disciple competition officially begins. When it becomes Hongling's turn, nearly every male cultivator present is instantly captivated by her beauty. Every male except our protagonist, who does not even spare her a single glance. Anyways, Hongling easily defeats her opponent without much effort. The vice sect master soon announces her victory before calling for the next participants. One of those participants happens to be Chu Ling, who is still acting clingy toward our protagonist. At this point, some disciples no longer know whether they should feel excited or irritated whenever they see her. One disciple even sighs that such beauty is completely wasted because of the way she behaves. Standing face to face with her opponent, Chu Ling quietly prepares herself. Meanwhile, her opponent is already furious, believing that Chu Ling's shameless behavior is causing all female cultivators to lose face. In response, Chu Ling casually fires back with a jab, saying that someone like our protagonist is far more important than blindly chasing cultivation alone. Naturally, this only enrages her opponent even further. Grinding her teeth in anger, she declares that she is going to beat Chu Ling so badly that she will finally wake up from this obsession. And just like that, the fight begins. Meanwhile, the entire time, Bai Chulan's senior sister keeps staring at our protagonist. She admits that he is truly handsome, easily among the top 10 most handsome men in their sect. However, what interests her even more is the mysterious technique he used to make so many women interested in him. Nonetheless, the fight ends with a single strike from Chu Ling. With that, she politely thanks her opponent for the duel. Afterward, she turns toward our protagonist, hoping to see some kind of reaction from him. At the same moment, the entire crowd of simps also turns toward him. If this had happened in the past, things would have been different. But now, people can only call our protagonist a scumbag for continuously ignoring Chu Ling. The next match is finally our protagonist's turn. He is about to face Gu Qing, and the disciples immediately urge Gu Qing to teach our protagonist a lesson. Meanwhile, our protagonist merely glances at the guy and realizes he is so insignificant that he can barely remember him. Completely unaware of this, Gu Qing charges forward with main character energy, loudly declaring that he will teach our protagonist a lesson he will never forget. However, in the very next second, our protagonist defeats him with a single punch. Gu Qing is blasted out of the stage instantly, and our boy calmly thanks him for the match. Seeing this, the Vice Sect Master admits that the cultivators from Balin Peak are truly strong. As a result, he compliments Bai Chulan, thinking that not only is she powerful in cultivation, but she is also exceptionally talented at guiding her disciples. Although her students are nothing short of outstanding, the Vice Sect Master still notices a serious problem. That is because he believes that if Hongling and Chu Ling were to face our protagonist, they would most likely surrender immediately. However, that is not even the worst part. Even his junior sister, Bai Chulan, looks as though her relationship with our protagonist is far more than that of master and disciple. As a result, the man concludes that he must do something before the sect transforms into some kind of joyous union sect. In the following matches, the future empresses alongside our protagonist completely dominate their opponents. Eventually, the tournament reaches the round where our protagonist has to face the empresses themselves. Before the match begins, Hongling tells our protagonist that she knows she is no match for him, but at the very least, he should avoid hitting her in the face. To this, our protagonist thanks her for the reminder, and immediately punches her in the face. As expected, Hongling becomes furious. She instantly launches a similar attack toward our protagonist. Seeing this, our protagonist responds with the exact same technique. Hongling is sent flying out of the arena, and just like that, she loses. Unlike his previous opponents, our protagonist does not even bother looking at her afterward, nor does he thank her for the fight. Seeing this, Hongling grits her teeth and tells him that she is not done with him yet. Meanwhile, the crowd, who has been carefully observing our protagonist the entire time, begins wondering if they may have somehow misunderstood him. In the next fight, our protagonist faces Linghu once again. Linghu admits that although he has improved greatly, he still believes he cannot defeat our protagonist. To this, our protagonist compliments him for recognizing his own weakness while still remaining brave enough to fight. He states that this is the true path toward improving one's cultivation. Anyways, Linghu also admits that our protagonist is not an unreasonable person. This makes him question why he continues treating his junior sister so coldly. Our protagonist simply gestures for him to begin fighting, noting that there are some matters that other people cannot understand. The battle begins immediately as Linghu unleashes several waves of sword intent toward our protagonist. This time, our protagonist responds by unleashing his own sword intent. His sword intent easily overpowers and cuts straight through Linghu's attack. Linghu clearly did not expect our protagonist to be capable of using sword intent. So when our protagonist calmly asks if they should continue, Linghu immediately accepts defeat. As always, our protagonist remains polite, accepting the victory while thanking Linghu for the fight. Now all the masters from the other peaks are left utterly shocked. After all, our protagonist's master is not even a sword cultivator, yet her disciple managed to defeat a sword genius like Linghu. To them, this is simply mind-shattering. Because of this, the peak masters naturally begin fighting among themselves in an attempt to recruit our protagonist as their direct disciple. Each one claims they are more qualified than the others, and one of them even shamelessly asks Bai Chulan directly to hand over our protagonist. Watching them argue, Bai Chulan clearly has no intention of letting our protagonist join another peak. So naturally, the shameless masters begin flattering her and throwing out outrageous offers. One even promises to hand over 20 years' worth of his peak's resources if she allows our protagonist to join his peak and become his direct disciple. Still, Bai Chulan refuses firmly, adding that there is no room for negotiation. Our protagonist watches her reaction with confusion because, logically, she should be wary of what he might become in the future. But at that moment, someone suddenly appears, declaring that he will personally take our protagonist as his disciple. The man turns out to be a true powerhouse, the venerable battle sword. The moment this big shot appears, the other peak masters immediately pay their respects. Soon after, the surrounding disciples also bow respectfully, addressing the battle sword Venerable as Supreme Elder. In his thoughts, our protagonist explains that Venerables are experts at the Tao integration realm, meaning the fact that one personally came to recruit him is an enormous matter. Unsurprisingly, another Venerable soon appears, insisting that our protagonist would be more suitable as his direct disciple because of his sword Tao talent. As if on cue, a third Venerable enters as well, making the exact same argument. And just like that, 3 Supreme Elders become interested in our protagonist. Seeing this, Bai Chulan carefully explains that this situation is inappropriate and against sect rules. Normally, our protagonist should first pass through the proper stages before being chosen by an elder. The battle sword venerable immediately fires back, pointing out that Bai Chulan is not a sword cultivator, so how could she possibly guide our protagonist properly? Still, she insists that there is no reason to ignore the rules and snatch him away immediately. Since she remains so stubborn, the elder decides to ask our protagonist directly. Now faced with the choice of leaving his peak to join a different one under a supreme elder, both Bai Chulan and Hongling anxiously wait for his response. Seeing this, our protagonist merely smirks, as though he has been waiting for this exact moment. Without any hesitation, he immediately agrees. Naturally, this makes the elder overjoyed, and he decides to personally inform the sect master so the arrangement can be finalized. And just like that, the 3 supreme elders leave the arena. Meanwhile, the peak masters finally regain their senses and hurriedly return to the competition arena, hoping they can at least recruit some decent disciples before everything ends. At the same time, Bai Chulan's expression darkens while Hongling anxiously asks what they should do. She replies firmly, stating that no one is allowed to take our protagonist away. As a result, she immediately follows the Supreme Elders to meet the sect master herself. Meanwhile, the competition resumes. For the semifinals, Chu Ling is set to face Zhao Huarong. Naturally, the audience is left in awe at the sight of 2 stunning beauties about to battle each other. Before the fight begins, however, the scene shifts toward the sect hall. Inside, each venerable has already presented their suggestions and requests while waiting for the sect master's decision. The sect master, Liu Changfeng, calmly states that he has already made up his mind. Now the 3 supreme elders wait attentively for his answer. To everyone's shock, however, the old man's gaze suddenly lands on Bai Chulan. Then, without the slightest shame, he begins flattering her appearance, noting that he has not seen her in over half a year. Of course, the elders are completely stunned. Not a single one of them expected the dignified sect master to turn out to be such a shameless simp. In contrast, Bai Chulan looks completely unsurprised. Perhaps this is precisely the reason why she dared to follow the supreme elders here in the first place. Nonetheless, Bai Chulan respectfully greets the sect master. In response, Liu Changfeng suggests she should not address him so formally and insists she call him senior brother instead. However, she politely refuses while citing sect rules and proper etiquette. Seeing her persistence, Liu Changfeng drops the matter and asks her to explain why she came. Of course, everyone already knows she does not want any of the supreme elders taking our protagonist away. At this point, one of the elders reminds her that she is a spell cultivator, meaning she cannot cultivate the sword. However, the men are left shocked when Bai Chulan confidently declares that she can cultivate both. If they do not believe her, they can simply fight to test it. Because of this, she asks the sect master for permission to challenge the 3 supreme elders. The wager is simple. Whoever wins gets to keep our protagonist as their disciple. The elders agree and even decide to suppress their realms to the Void Realm in order to match her strength. With that settled, Bai Chulan suggests they head out immediately. The elder agrees to fight in the sky, noting that he is willing to endure being called a bully if it means doing what is best for the entire sect. Naturally, Liu Changfeng reminds him to hold back a little so he does not injure junior sister, Bai Chulan. However, to everyone's shock, Bai Chulan actually summons sword intent. Chu Ling notices this as well and is instantly stunned. Apparently, this was one of the abilities Bai Chulan possessed after becoming an empress in the future. Since the Supreme Elders know nothing about this, they immediately question how such a thing is even possible. In response, Bai Chulan calmly tells the elder to focus on the fight. Activating his own sword intent, the Supreme Elder facing her decides to ignore the sect master's warning and stop holding back entirely. Yet the outcome of the battle leaves everyone utterly shocked, especially the Supreme Elder himself, who can only watch as his sword intent is shattered by Bai Chulan's own. Seeing this, Bai Chulan wastes no time and immediately demands for the next elder to step forward. Unfortunately, the remaining elders have already lost the will to fight. The battle sword venerable admits that after witnessing such a display, he is fully convinced Bai Chulan is capable of teaching our protagonist and no longer has any intention of taking him away. The others quickly agree with his decision. Hearing this, Bai Chulan respectfully thanks the two martial uncles. After the fight, Liu Changfeng immediately checks on her condition. Curious, he asks how she managed to comprehend sword Dao and use techniques that do not belong to their sect. Bai Chulan admits that it is true and explains she only comprehended them by chance. While they are on the subject, Liu Changfeng suggests she visit his study and take a look at the sword techniques stored there. However, Bai Chulan ignores him as usual, before bluntly stating that she does not even like sword techniques to begin with. Back at the arena, it is finally time for the last match. Chu Ling is about to face our protagonist. The moment their eyes meet, she instantly notices something is wrong, because our protagonist's eyes are radiating killing intent. Even while the crowd urges her to beat some sense into him, Chu Ling suddenly drops to her knees and begs our protagonist to finish her off instead. Lu Yu is completely confused. As for the audience, they begin wondering if she has perhaps gone crazy. One disciple even asks aloud whether she owes our protagonist a massive debt. Meanwhile, our protagonist coldly tells her there is nothing between them anymore and orders her to stay out of his way from now on. However, Chu Ling refuses. She declares that he can kill her if he wants, but leaving his side is something she will never agree to. Fed up with her obsession, our protagonist slaps her across the face and sends her flying backward. At the same time, he curses at her and calls her a crazy woman. Since Chu Ling shows no intention of fighting, our protagonist naturally wins by default. Just like that, he is immediately handed the winner's token of the competition, granting him entrance to the treasure pavilion. After receiving it, our protagonist thanks the vice sect master. But at that moment, something suddenly catches his attention. Strangely enough, it seems to be coming from Bai Chulan. Speaking of her, she is currently being bombarded with questions from her senior sister. The woman wants to know how Bai Chulan became strong enough to face off against a supreme elder at the Dao integration realm. When Bai Chulan remains silent, her senior sister wonders if they are no longer close anymore. However, Bai Chuan tells her that is not the case, but she feels that something is wrong. Eventually, her senior sister notices something unusual and points out that Bai Chuan seems far more seductive than before. She immediately asks what she has been doing behind closed doors. Bai Chulan is startled by this and wonders when such a thing even became possible. However, she soon realizes the truth. Her condition, the chaos yin poison, has appeared ahead of time. Because of this, she excuses herself and leaves immediately. Seeing this, our protagonist can only smirk. In the past, it was he who absorbed the poison from her, but now he is curious and looking forward to seeing how she plans to suppress it by herself. The next scene takes us to the treasure pavilion. Our protagonist hands over his token before entering inside. The pavilion is massive and towering. Upon seeing him, the pavilion master explains that the higher he goes, the greater the grade of the treasures will naturally become. However, our protagonist is only allowed to pick 3 treasures. Hearing this, our protagonist immediately lists the 3 items he wants. However, while 2 of the items are considered extremely valuable, the man becomes confused when our protagonist requests the 9 Dragons treasure furnace. Our protagonist simply tells him not to worry because he already has a use for it. As for that use, our protagonist plans on selling it. However, no matter how sweet his offers or how much he promotes the furnace, no one is willing to exchange it for a profound yin soul fruit. Just when he seems to be at a loss for what to do, he suddenly gets an idea. Instantly, our protagonist begins explaining the furnace's abilities in detail, skillfully selling the dream to everyone around him. According to him, if anyone wants pills of any kind, no matter the grade, even the rarest ones imaginable, all it takes is a single profound yin soul fruit. Just look at that smirk on his face. It is as if he has solved a major world problem. Of course, this immediately attracts everyone's attention, because even cultivators are still human. They cannot turn a blind eye to what they desire rather than what they actually need. And just like that, our protagonist successfully exchanges the furnace for the profound yin soul fruit. Later, at the gates of the sect, Chu Ling can still be seen waiting for our protagonist to return. The moment she sees him, she quickly approaches and explains that she made his favorite dessert. However, our protagonist completely ignores her as usual. Apparently, our protagonist has finally secured the 3 items he needs to break through to the next realm of his cultivation. Chu Ling realizes he is clearly up to something and decides to follow him. Our protagonist can only note that she is crazy before instantly teleporting away. The next scene takes us inside Bai Chulan's personal chambers. Outside, her senior sister paces around nervously, wondering why Bai Chulan is hiding things from her and why the temperature around the chamber feels so strange. That is when Hongling suddenly appears and informs her that Bai Chulan is suffering from the Chaos Yin poison. However, it should not have acted up this early. Naturally, Bai Chulan's senior sister is shocked, because this is the first time she has ever heard about such a condition. So Hongling explains that it is because of her master's constitution, which causes her internal energy to become unstable. Normally, this is supposed to happen only after reaching the Tao integration realm. But now it is happening while Bai Chulan is merely at the void refining realm, meaning the poison has awakened far too early. Speaking of Bai Chulan, even after using the same technique she relied on in her previous life to suppress the poison, it is clearly not working. Now she begins to wonder if the only reason she managed to suppress the poison in the past was because of our protagonist's help all along. Just then, they overhear Bai Chulan's scream. It turns out she successfully suppresses the poison, and to her senior sister's shock, Bai Chulan also successfully breaks through to the Tao integration realm. When her senior sister asks if she is okay, Bai Chulan calmly tells her that she is fine. However, after inspecting her condition, her senior sister thinks otherwise, but Bai Chulan simply brushes it off as a small matter. The moment she notices Hongling nearby, Bai Chulan immediately asks about our protagonist. Hongling replies that the moment he won the competition, he suddenly disappeared. She suspects he has already gone outside the sect. Hearing this, both women immediately think that the place he likely headed to is the God Burial Ridge. Once again, Bai Chulan's senior sister is left speechless because she is clearly the only one not following the conversation. Regardless, Bai Chulan takes Hongling with her, insisting that they head there together. This finally makes Bai Chulan's senior sister question them because of how they constantly leave her out of everything. She demands to know what exactly her sister and her disciple are hiding. Turning slightly, Bai Chulan explains that they were simply discussing whether to bring her along. But it is obviously a lie, causing her senior sister to pout in annoyance. That is because she notices Hongling looks unusually absent-minded. As a result, Hongling quickly makes up an excuse of her own, leaving Bai Chulan's senior sister even more speechless. However, deep in her heart, Hongling only hopes that our protagonist is not already in danger. Eventually, the group reaches their destination, and surprisingly enough, Chu Ling has already been waiting there. The artist honestly did a great job making her thick in all the right places. The moment Chu Ling notices them, she casually greets Bai Chulan and Hongling as sisters, while respectfully referring to Bai Chulan's senior sister as martial auntie. Once again, Bai Chulan's senior sister is left completely speechless, wondering just how close their relationship has become for them to address each other so casually. Anyways, Chuling explains that she managed to get here by secretly following our protagonist. At the same time, Hongling explains that they need to enter immediately. Now she finally reveals the reason why she has been worried and acting so absent-minded this entire time. It turns out she did exactly what Chu Ling once did to our protagonist. Chu Ling cannot believe that Hongling also poisoned him. Hongling confirms it, explaining that the poison she used was the primordial morning mist. Because of this, Chu Ling immediately insists that they all check on our protagonist right away. First, the heavenly rigidity poison, and now the primordial morning mist, just like us. Bai Chulin's senior sister is also completely clueless and has no idea what is even happening anymore. Inside the cave, she is shocked to see countless dead monsters scattered everywhere. Seeing this, Chu Ling quickly tells Martial Auntie not to be afraid, because our protagonist apparently handled them himself. Looking at the numerous corpses, the Martial Auntie wonders how such a thing is even possible considering the beetles were at the shattering infant realm, while our protagonist was merely at the origin core realm. Nonetheless, Chu Ling continues leading the way toward our protagonist. As expected, our protagonist is seated in the middle of the palace. The moment Hongling sees him, she breathes a sigh of relief because the poison has not erupted yet. Unfortunately, she speaks far too soon. Just like with the first poison, our protagonist regresses with the primordial morning mist. Anxious, Chu Ling immediately rushes over to check on him. However, this only makes our protagonist furious, as he coldly tells them to get lost. Seeing that his life is in danger, Hongling insists that he allow them to help. With Bai Chulan's power, they can freeze him and prevent his body from exploding. Yet even after hearing this, our protagonist still tells them to get lost. Because of this, Chu Ling suddenly pulls out her sword and declares herself our protagonist's protector. With tears falling from her eyes, she tells everyone to leave immediately. In the end, Hongling leaves together with Bai Chulan, though she does so with visible irritation. Not long after they leave, a massive explosion erupts from the area they had just exited. At that moment, everyone immediately becomes worried about our protagonist. After some time passes without any sign of our protagonist, Hongling begins to believe that she has killed him once again. She never expected such a thing to be possible, especially considering our protagonist should possess at least 9 lives. Seeing her panic, Bai Chulan does not respond. Instead, she simply puts Hongling to sleep. Sometime later, Bai Chulan's senior sister enters and wonders if they should go check on our protagonist. Hearing this, Bai Chulan insists that they wait a little longer. After 2 more hours pass, even she is surprised to discover that our protagonist has actually broken through to the shattering infant realm despite the poison. Inside the palace, our protagonist radiates a completely different aura. Seeing this, Bai Chulan asks with slight concern if he is all right. However, he does not respond to her question. Instead, he asks what poison his master used on him. She explains that the poison she used was the Taiyin marrow bug and is about to explain further. But our protagonist suddenly stops her, noting that every single time he breaks through, a new poison always seems to erupt inside him. Then our protagonist asks what stage she poisoned him at, wondering whether her position was 4th, 5th, or perhaps even 7th. Bai Chulan admits that she does not understand what he means. Hearing this, our protagonist stands up and casually notes that it does not really matter anymore. As he prepares to leave, he notices that Bai Chulan has also broken through to the Dao integration realm. What our protagonist says next immediately leaves her shocked. He explains that now the poison will truly begin acting up, and from this moment onward, his master will finally experience the same pain he once endured for her sake. At that moment, Bai Chulan realizes she is genuinely in serious trouble. Meanwhile, Hongling finally wakes up. As expected, the first thing she does is demand to know what happened to our protagonist. Bai Chulan appears before her and calmly tells her not to worry because our protagonist is completely fine. When Hongling asks about the primordial morning mist, Bai Chulan explains that only a single day has passed, and judging from our protagonist's reaction, nothing seems wrong with him. However, rather than remaining fixated on our protagonist, Bai Chulan reminds Hongling about the ancient heaven's chosen battlefield. This instantly makes Hongling remember Feng Wuxi, whom she had almost completely forgotten about. Still, Hongling leaves while insisting that she needs to check up on our protagonist first. Her master can only sigh helplessly, thinking that just like in their previous life, Hongling has once again fallen in love with our protagonist. Arriving at our protagonist's residence, Hongling discovers that Chu Ling is already there as expected. Hongling explains that she simply came to check up on our protagonist. After hearing Chu Ling's explanation, she decides to stay around for a while. Eventually, both women end up falling asleep while keeping watch over our protagonist. Speaking of him, our protagonist has finally succeeded in suppressing the primordial morning mist. Not only that, but he also never expected the poison to be so effective that he could actually make use of it. Apparently, our protagonist used the poison to refine a nascent soul with rather peculiar behavior. Naturally, our boy immediately begins teasing the little guy. Seeing this, our protagonist thinks to himself that he is definitely getting closer and closer to his ultimate goal. A few days later, the sect suddenly makes an announcement summoning all disciples. Our protagonist, slightly puzzled, wonders aloud what exactly is happening. However, the moment the system appears, our protagonist instantly realizes the truth. It is actually the ancient heaven's chosen battlefield. In his previous life, he participated in it while still at the origin core realm. Now, as he heads toward the gathering location, he confidently thinks to himself that with his current shattering infant realm cultivation, he will definitely achieve far greater things this time around. The next scene takes us to the sect pavilion. Our protagonist listens as an elder explains the anomaly that has opened within the ancient heaven's chosen battlefield. The battlefield only opens once every millennium, and only disciples under 100 years old are allowed to participate. However, our protagonist's mood immediately changes the moment he notices Chu Ling standing behind him, asking whether he plans on going. Although this event offers countless rewards and opportunities, it is also extremely dangerous. Not only will the participants face monsters and deadly trials, but disciples from other sects will also be participating. Naturally, This means people will compete and kill one another for resources and treasures. Although Hongling is closely watching our protagonist, deep inside her heart she is actually thinking about Feng Wuxi. It is obvious that she feels conflicted as her thoughts continuously drift between Feng Wuxi and our protagonist. Soon, a massive ship appears, signaling the time to depart for the ancient heaven's chosen battlefield. As expected, Chu Ling keeps following and pestering our protagonist the entire time. Meanwhile, inside the ancient battlefield, the celestial monster emperor gathers the rest of the demons and orders them to kill all human cultivators and geniuses the moment they enter the realm. The Demon King commander steps forward and accepts the emperor's order. He even promises to personally guide any demons skilled in monster arts and promote them afterward. Of course, hearing this leaves the demons extremely excited, and they naturally decide to obey the command. Almost every monster and demon chooses to follow the order. All except one. One demon silently swears to kill the monster emperor and return peace to the monster race. Meanwhile, aboard the ship, someone suddenly calls out to our protagonist. The person turns out to be Ling Hu, who starts talking about a similar teaching known as the eternal teaching of the three dynasties. Our protagonist remains silent, not understanding where he is trying to go with the conversation. Apparently, the 5 major sects follow teachings similar to it, but it quickly becomes obvious that Ling Hu is only using the topic as an excuse to strike up a conversation with Hongling. Seeing her completely speechless, the guy is utterly lost. Our protagonist simply tells him to forget about it. Regardless, Ling Hu continues acting like a simp. Unfortunately for him, Hongling looks like someone carrying far too many thoughts in her mind to care. Eventually, they finally arrive at their destination. As expected, all the sects are assembling in one location. Disciples from various minor sects have already arrived, and they immediately begin commenting on the newcomers. Among the major sects is the Yin-Yang Law sect. One warrior points out that, from the look of things, the sect has already chosen its holy son and holy daughter, since Yang Wufa, the holy son, and Luo Yuan, the holy daughter, look so compatible together, everyone naturally assumes they are Dao companions. Next to arrive is the Supreme Sword sect. As expected, the sect carries an overwhelming aura suited for sword cultivators. And finally, the most powerful and widely recognized sect arrives, our protagonist's sect, the Great Dao sect. Our protagonist steps out alongside the girls, with Chu Ling, as usual, staying close to him. The moment Yang Wufa sees them, he immediately steps forward to greet Xiao Huarong while introducing himself. She replies politely and gives her own introduction in return. Feeling encouraged, he tries to ask for Hongling's and Chuling's names as well. Chuling remains silent, while Hongling immediately shoots him a look that clearly tells him not to test his luck. Our protagonist simply observes as Yang Wufa sighs before leaving. Just like in his previous life, our protagonist thinks the guy still has that incredibly punchable personality. At that instant, Chu Ling immediately asks where he is going. As usual, our protagonist gives no answer. Both she and Hongling can only watch as he calmly begins cultivating. Of course, this causes some cultivators nearby to mock and insult him. One wonders why anyone would practice at such a time, while another shakes his head at the sight of 2 beautiful women chasing after someone so pathetic. Because of this, one cultivator warns his friend to stop staring at Hongling and Chuling. The reason is simple. The Supreme Emperor Dynasty's 3rd prince, Shangguan Wucheng, has just arrived alongside his companion, Shangguan Huanling. Compared to Hongling and Chuling, many cultivators immediately claim Huanling is completely out of their league because she carries the natural presence of nobility. As for our protagonist, when we look into his thoughts, it becomes clear that she too is one of the empresses who betrayed him. And as usual, he wants absolutely nothing to do with them. Meanwhile, Huanling is slightly shocked to see our protagonist. Even more shocking to her is seeing her fellow empresses sticking so closely to him. Naturally, she wonders why they are not avoiding him and hating him to the bone. Just then, the 3rd prince notices how beautiful the 2 women beside our protagonist are. Understanding his intentions immediately, Huanling warns him not to try his luck and adds that he should not provoke our protagonist. This instantly makes Wucheng furious, as he interprets her warning as an insult. Because of that, he decides he will deal with our protagonist the moment they enter the realm. Hearing this, Huanling calmly informs him that he will die if that happens. However, the 3rd prince merely chuckles and brushes off the warning as though it means nothing. Unbeknownst to him, this was actually planned from the very beginning. Huanling deliberately instigated him and quietly pushed him toward his death. and the poor fool is going to die without ever knowing why. A day later, the gateway leading to the Ancient Heaven's chosen battlefield finally opens. The moment the gateway to the Ancient Heaven's chosen battlefield opens, Lu Yu is the first to dive in. As expected, Chu Ling follows closely behind him. Seeing this, the cultivators from the other sects quickly rush forward as well, unwilling to let the great Dao sect take the lead. Meanwhile, Holy Sun Wufa is immediately enraged upon seeing Lu Yu take the initiative. Without hesitation, he follows after our protagonist. The moment they enter the realm, Wufa wastes no time confronting Lu Yu. Our protagonist can clearly sense the killing intent flaring from the man's body. Because of this, Lu Yu calmly promises to deal with him quickly and ensure the fool's killing intent never flares up again. Wufa makes the first move, activating a yin-yang technique in an attempt to kill our protagonist. However, to his shock, Lu Yu destroys the attack with a single punch using nothing but brute force. Seeing this, Wufa admits that our protagonist possesses some skill and immediately unleashes a stronger attack known as world-destroying light. This time, Lu Yu finally uses his spiritual energy. As he prepares to counter the attack, he coldly remarks that this is all the Holy Son of the Yin-Yang sect has to offer. The next moment, our protagonist unleashes his signature celestial venerable punch. The attack tears straight through Wufa's technique, leaving him utterly shocked. As a result, he takes the full force of the punch head-on, and just like that, the man fails to survive a single strike from our protagonist. Honestly, this outcome is expected. During our protagonist's previous life, Wufa did not even survive their earlier clash, and back then Lu Yu had been far weaker than he is now. Nonetheless, Lu Yu calmly takes the man's storage ring. After robbing him, our protagonist continues moving forward, noting that he now needs to retrieve the sword he once used in his previous life. A few moments later, the other cultivators finally arrive, only to be left completely stunned. Naturally, they begin wondering who could have defeated and killed the Holy Son of the Yin-Yang sect so quickly. As if on cue, a blood soul stone suddenly shatters. Seeing this, the people outside the Ancient Heaven's chosen battlefield are stunned as well, because the meaning behind it is obvious. The holy daughter Luo Yuan merely snorts and calls Wufa trash. Afterward, she enters the Ancient Heaven's chosen battlefield herself, while wondering who could have killed him so quickly. Seeing this, one cultivator comments that the event has not even fully begun, yet the Holy Son of the Yin-Yang sect is already dead. Another cultivator chimes in, noting that the fool's reckless actions have caused the Yin-Yang sect to completely lose face. At the same time, the third prince sees this and decides it is finally time for him to enter the battlefield as well. Huanling watches him step into the realm and cannot help but smile wickedly because the man has no idea what awaits him. Perhaps her plan still involves using our protagonist to kill him. Meanwhile, our protagonist arrives at a plain filled with countless swords. As we already know, he has come for his sword. Lu Yu also admits that throughout all this time, he intentionally refused to use any other weapon. The moment he steps into the sword plains, the countless swords begin to vibrate violently. And just like that, several swords launch themselves toward him. However, our protagonist effortlessly destroys them with a mere wave of his hand. Soon, even more swords fly toward him from every direction. This time, Lu Yu uses his spiritual energy because he has no intention of wasting time. After destroying every incoming sword, he leaps toward the highest point of the plains. There, he finally finds his Excalibur. Our protagonist quietly notes how much he has missed the sword during all this time. Lu Yu then tells the sword not to be afraid or confused. To his surprise, the sword actually reacts. It immediately asks what nonsense our protagonist is spouting and questions why it would ever be scared. Hearing this, Lu Yu instantly realizes that it is the spirit of the sword speaking. At this point in time, the sword has not yet exposed its cowardly nature. Regardless, our protagonist commands the sword to follow him and become the strongest weapon in the world. After our protagonist lists his ambitions and explains how he plans to make the sword even stronger than the Supreme Sword and the Emperor Invincible Sword, the Stone Sword immediately agrees and decides to acknowledge him as its master. And just like that, our protagonist finally regains the sword he once used to become a venerable, slaughter countless demons, and carve his name into history in his previous life. As for the sword's name, our protagonist decides to call it Stone Sword, or Little Stone for short. The sword is completely speechless at his terrible naming sense and immediately protests, insisting he give it a better name instead. However, our cheeky protagonist misunderstands and assumes the sword actually likes the name. The sword hurriedly denies this, claiming the name sounds awful, but unfortunately our protagonist refuses to change it. As expected, Chu-Ling follows after him and congratulates him for reclaiming the sword from his previous life. Lu Yu simply retracts the sword and ignores her as usual. Naturally, Chu-Ling asks where her young master is heading next. Our protagonist thinks to himself that now that he has retrieved his sword, it is finally time to head toward the first level of the Ancient Heaven's chosen battlefield. He explains that the place is filled with treasures, so naturally we can already guess what he plans to do. The first level of the Ancient Heaven's chosen battlefield is a massive lake known as the Ultimate Clear Water. Soaking within the water greatly improves a warrior's cultivation aptitude, while hidden treasures lie buried beneath the depths. Speaking of treasures, Hongling suddenly remembers the pearl our protagonist once gave her in their previous life. This time, however, she plans to obtain it herself. Meanwhile, countless cultivators attempt to dive toward the bottom of the lake. Unfortunately, the deeper one descends, the greater the pressure becomes. Many cultivators are eventually forced to give up midway and resurface. While Hongling continues diving deeper, another cultivator quickly follows after her. The person turns out to be the third prince. Seeing this as the perfect opportunity, he immediately introduces himself. To his surprise, however, Hongling calmly tells him she already knows who he is, because Huanling is her junior sister. Wu Chang clearly did not expect Hongling to be acquainted with Huanling, so he immediately attempts to get closer to her and even suggests they go on a date after returning. Hearing this, Hongling casually tells him she might give him a chance depending on how deep he can dive. The third prince confidently replies that he can dive so deep that she would eventually become overwhelmed and beg him to stop and be gentle. Of course, those are merely my wild thoughts. Anyways, Hongling only smiles after hearing him boast that he can descend several thousand feet. The third prince immediately takes the lead and dives deeper into the lake. However, Hongling never intended to compete fairly from the start. As a result, she suddenly attacks him from behind. Wu Chang senses the incoming attack just in time and immediately splits it apart with his heaven-piercing halberd slash. But Hongling is far from finished. She instantly follows up with another technique known as the Fearless Seal. The third prince is completely shocked. He never expected a random beauty like Hongling to possess such terrifying strength. And just like that, Hongling watches him get blasted back toward the surface. With this, no one remains capable of getting in her way. At 2,000 feet beneath the lake, Hongling recalls our protagonist once mentioning that the pearl was hidden around 3,000 feet below. However, after reaching 3,000 feet, she finds absolutely nothing. Even more shocking, when she reaches 4,000 feet, she still cannot see the bottom of the lake. This immediately causes her to wonder whether our protagonist lied about something so important in their previous life. Eventually, at 5,000 feet beneath the lake, she finally discovers what she has been searching for. Without hesitation, she grabs the pearl and immediately begins absorbing its energy to improve her cultivation aptitude, but then she suddenly pauses. At that moment, she realizes just how much suffering our protagonist endured to obtain this treasure in their previous life. Even after going through all that hardship, he still resisted the temptation to use it for himself, and instead gave it to her. Only now does Hongling finally begin to understand how much our protagonist truly sacrificed for her. Her master was right all along. Among everyone around her, our protagonist was the one who cared for her the most. Hongling admits to herself that no one could sacrifice for her or treat her as well as our protagonist, not even Feng Wuxi. Still, to her, that is not love. Only Feng Wuxi is capable of making her heart race. From that statement alone, it is obvious she is one of those delusional women who prefer living in dreams rather than facing reality. As a result, she promises to do anything for our protagonist, as long as it has nothing to do with being together with him. After a while, she finally surfaces after successfully breaking through to the shattering infant realm. To her surprise, the third prince has been waiting for her the entire time. Seeing that he intends to fight, Hongling points out that he could not even defeat her underwater, so this time would obviously be no different. Even then, Wu Chang still makes the first move. Hongling responds with her fearless divine fist, instantly knocking him back several meters. Apparently, she still held back slightly. She calmly notes that if the prince does not wish to continue, she will leave first. The third prince is clearly furious and frustrated, unable to understand how she suddenly became far stronger than she was underwater. The next scene shifts to our protagonist, who has just arrived at 100 Medicine Valley. The 100 Medicine Valley is said to be the garden of an ancient sect. However, our protagonist explains that the truly important thing is that the place is filled with formations, and this is exactly where he can condense his second life. To accomplish that, he must obtain one of the Golden Heaven Great Sunflowers. With that in mind, he heads down the mountain, remembering how he obtained one in his previous life. But then something catches his attention. It turns out someone is attempting to break through a formation. Our protagonist notes that the guy is actually quite talented. However, he never encountered someone like him in his previous life, which likely means the man died here. Assuming that is the case, our protagonist decides to help the formation prodigy. However, the guy is immediately stunned by our protagonist's appearance, causing him to question who he is. After confirming that our protagonist is not an enemy, the man shamelessly begins complimenting his appearance. Our protagonist notices the flattery and casually asks for his name. The man immediately responds, revealing that his name is Li Huayu. Our protagonist tells Li Huayu that he will remember him before instructing him on how to break the formation. Watching the demonstration, Huayu is left completely stunned. Our protagonist is not merely breaking the formation, he is actually changing the entire system itself. Huayu immediately begins taking notes. Before leaving, our protagonist even gifts him a heavenly golden sunflower and expresses hope that they will meet again someday. Unfortunately for Li Huayu, he fails to learn our protagonist's name. Because of our protagonist's earlier actions, the entire formation changes. To Huayu's shock, he suddenly finds himself trapped inside the formation together with two men. The poor guy instantly begins sweating when he notices one of them pulling out baby oil. He can only wonder why our protagonist did not make the formation summon girls instead. Meanwhile, our protagonist arrives at the Heavenly Spirit Pool. It is said that the pool is overflowing with spiritual energy, making it the perfect place to enhance one's cultivation. However, our protagonist suddenly pauses the moment he sees a man begging for help. Soon after, he notices a flying demon pursuing him. The demon laughs arrogantly, believing yet another unfortunate victim has wandered into its grasp. Unfortunately for it, the real unfortunate one ends up being itself after becoming our protagonist's target. Just then, reinforcements arrive. Our protagonist merely labels them as annoying insects before casually exterminating all of them with a single wave of his sword. Now, out of danger, the man hurriedly thanks our protagonist and promises to repay this life-saving grace in the future. However, our protagonist coolly turns around and tells him there is no need. Following the direction the man came from, our protagonist is slightly surprised to discover a large number of human corpses scattered across the area. Just then, he overhears two cultivators rushing toward a gathering point. When our protagonist asks about it, one of them explains that Hongling is gathering all the sects to form some kind of alliance. Instead of allowing the demons to pick off the human cultivators one by one, they plan to unite and fight back together. After explaining the situation, the two men are shocked when our protagonist refuses to join them. What surprises them even more is the fact that he plans to head toward the Heavenly Pool, which is practically no different from seeking death. At the Heavenly Pool, our protagonist arrives and is immediately greeted by a demon who expresses surprise that a mere human dares to come there alone. Because of this, the leopard demon immediately begins mocking our protagonist. Excited, he turns toward his subordinates and asks them what they want to see him do with the human. One demon suggests making him beg for a quick death, while another proposes something equally cruel. In the end, all of them agree on one thing. They want the leopard demon to kill our protagonist in the most entertaining way possible. Speaking of quick deaths, the leopard demon is suddenly sliced cleanly in half before he can even realize what happened. Our protagonist coldly mocks him, asking if the idiot does not know that villains who talk too much always die quickly. Seeing their companion instantly killed, the rest of the demons naturally charge toward our protagonist in rage, hoping to avenge their fallen brother. In response, our protagonist transforms into a streak of light and exterminates them all in the blink of an eye. Now the remaining demons are left wishing they had worn different colored pants. Without hesitation, they immediately drop to their knees and begin begging our protagonist for mercy. However, our protagonist calmly tells them that he will only let them live if they can survive his next strike. After successfully dealing with the demons, our protagonist finally enters the Heavenly Pool. Meanwhile, one demon somehow manages to survive and desperately rushes back to the Demon Emperor to report everything that happened. The Demon Emperor listens quietly as the trembling demon explains how our protagonist suddenly appeared and wiped everyone out. Hearing this, the Demon Emperor becomes interested and asks just how terrifying our protagonist truly was. The demon hurriedly replies that our protagonist was so terrifying, he killed everyone except him with a single sword strike. However, midway through his explanation, the demon suddenly freezes in shock. Now trembling in fear, he immediately begins begging for mercy, sensing that he is about to be executed for fleeing the battlefield. Contrary to his expectations, the demon emperor kills him for an entirely different reason. The fool had forgotten his main mission, and that mission was hunting down Feng Wuxi. Just then, another demon appears and reports that they have finally discovered Feng Wuxi's whereabouts. Because of this, the demon emperor immediately gives the order to hunt him down. A sinister grin appears on his face as he comments that he will personally ensure the Phoenix clan is completely erased from this world. Meanwhile, Hongling has successfully gathered all the human cultivators and sect disciples in one location. It turns out this was something our protagonist accomplished in his previous life, and Hongling quietly thinks to herself that she has simply done it ahead of time for him, meaning it is now time for her to leave. She informs the gathered cultivators about her departure. Naturally, many of them become confused, and one eventually asks where she plans to go. Hongling calmly replies that she is going to find her true love, and of course that person happens to be Feng Wuxi. Unfortunately for him, Feng Wuxi is currently getting overwhelmed while loudly wondering why he is suddenly being targeted. His attacker is none other than the demon emperor himself, who casually replies that if he needed to explain every time he attacked someone, he would have become an Oscar-winning writer by now. Feng Wuxi instantly becomes furious upon hearing this, especially after realizing the demons are attacking him in groups. The demon emperor merely scoffs, wondering who exactly created the rule that opponents must fight one-on-one.